Welcome to RIMScast Canada, a video podcast produced by RIMS, exploring the evolving risk landscape in Canada today. This series will be hosted in 2026 by Aaron Lukoni, RIMS Canada National Conference Committee Chair. I'm your producer and co-host, Justin Smullison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS, the Risk and Insurance Management Society. Our mission with RIMScast Canada is to provide perspective from experienced risk professionals in Canada to further educate and inform the global risk community. This episode's topic is ERM, and Aaron will interview Nicole Stinson. She is the founder of Upside ERM Solutions, which is based in British Columbia. And Nicole also had 17 years as a risk professional at BC Housing. So we're going to get all sorts of wonderful insight from her today. Let's get it going. Please welcome your RIMScast Canada host, Aaron Lukoni.
Welcome everyone to RIMScast Canada. This is episode 2. I would love to introduce my next guest. Today we are hosting Nicole Stinson. She is a colleague of mine from many different RIMS Canada conferences and various RIMS events and risk management community of practice events around British Columbia and Canada. And so I will pass it over to her to give a brief introduction of yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I'm so happy to be here and participate in your second podcast for RIMScast Canada. My name is Nicole Stinson, and I am the founder and CEO of Upside Solutions. And I just focus on enterprise risk management. So this is after a 20-year career in the public sector, working in strategic planning and corporate governance. And now I work with all sorts of sectors, specifically around enterprise risk management. And I'm really excited for our conversation today.
And I love that because, there has been a lot of chat about people-centered ERM. So when we talk about that, what does that actually mean in practice? You have some experience with that?
Yeah, a little bit. I do. I think of ERM as so much more than just risk management. And adopting it is a transformational experience for an organization if they're doing it with intent. And so with that, you're looking to, apply solid change management principles. And these are centered on people, right? People and communications. That is really the core of what organizations do and how we work. So when we think of ERM as being people-centered, we're shifting the focus away from it being a checkbox exercise and just making sure you have your inventory of ERM tools like risk registers and heat maps. And you're really working towards engaging your people in your strategy and engaging them in the risk management practice and adding value to decisions like planning for the future, allocating resources, and where you prioritize work and initiatives.
Well, and people are the most important asset in any organization, regardless of what kind of commodity or service you sell. So in the organizations that you've worked with, what's the most common mistake that you've seen them make when people say they have ERM? Being someone who deals with that quite often.
Yeah. So when folks say they have ERM, and a lot of organizations do have it in some form. And if they're publicly traded, it's even a requirement. I ask them, so, how's that working for them? Right. And the most common challenge I hear is that there's a misconnect between leadership and management or, the governance and the operations part of an organization. Right. There's different expectations around what risk means, what ERM is supposed to deliver, and how they're expected to engage in that. And so, when leadership's only experience with ERM is like a quarterly questionnaire or a static report with some color-coded risks, the strategic value isn't clear. And so the report might get approved, a box gets checked, and nothing really moves forward. And then, from management or operations perspective, they're having to contort their thinking in order to respond to these questionnaires, or they're not using the language of their business in order to fulfill like an ERM requirement. And that's a mistake, right? ERM is supposed to add value. It's supposed to be integrated. And it's really an ERM lead's role to translate the intention of ERM in a meaningful way to the business areas. So that it is, it's a two-way street. You're not just collecting data, but you're also helping drive the business forward or the organization forward.
And so, how do you move it from that kind of report or just a checklist framework, like the surveys once a year, into that real decision making that really starts at the top with those leadership teams?
Yeah, right. And this is what we all want. You want ERM to be a framework, and it's so much more than just color coded reports and heat maps, right? And this is where tone at the top is critical. And that doesn't mean that leadership needs to have expertise in ERM or risk management. But they do need to leverage ERM to support their responsibilities in managing and overseeing organizational risk. And for ERM to be successful, it means it should be adding value, not just process for the organization. And this comes in the form of providing insight and foresight that enables better decisions, and decisions at the strategic and at the operational, realms of an organization. So having ERM should mean participating in ERM, and that the ERM process doesn't only take a report and some static data, but also generates thinking and action. And for leaders, this means expecting information and discussions about uncertainty and being prepared to provide direction accordingly. ERM should challenge in a productive way leadership, it should inform where they want to fund risk management and where they're willing to accept risks and enable them to communicate that. And to be clear on where the organization's guardrails around risk are. And for ERM leads, this is where we're translators. We should focus or help management focus on facilitating their staff's participation, making participation in ERM accessible and not, an off the side of their desk practice. We should also be able to translate leadership's direction on risk management, understand their tolerances and priorities, and help the operations folks, take that direction and implement it. And so that expectations are clear around, where they have authority to manage risk and don't need to escalate, and when they do. And this is, again, it's good corporate communication practices, and circling back, right? So the data, the information flows two ways. And where I've seen this work well is when leaders can have a true enterprise-wide view of risk, and they're empowered to pivot or shift priorities accordingly. So it's not static, but it actually adds to the flexibility and the dynamism of decision-making and planning. And also, when management and staff see ERM as a valid tool, they start to invite the ERM people to their own planning work, right? They see it as an enabler, something that strengthens. Strengthens their case for needed resources, right? You start bringing the risk folks in to help bolster your business proposals, right? Like that's a win for the organization, not just for ERM. And then also you start to have senior level folks championing not just ERM as like a concept, but as an actual legitimate practice for the organization.
It is. It's that ingraining it all the way from the top, all the way through. Because, once you get that buy-in, it just starts to trickle in at all the different levels, making risk more prevalent and becoming more of a culture than, again, that whole checklist. Okay, so I need to ask. So from your experience in the public and private sectors, and as a consultant, where do you find that governance and risk most disconnect?
Yeah. And there are differences and commonalities, of course, across sectors. And especially when you're considering public and private, right? So governance as a function is oversight, decision-making, authority, influence, right? And specifically, it's, who and which departments or committees have influence over key decisions like the strategy, budget, hiring, stakeholder management, engaging in critical partnerships, right? So, that's kind of the realm of governance. And in the private sector overall, these activities tend to move faster than in the public sector. There's a risk bias towards innovation and opportunity, and there's more of an appetite to, quote unquote, fail faster, which really means learning and adapting quickly. And this is in response to markets and to the external environment. So that nimbleness is kind of, it's part of the life force for a successful private sector company or organization, right? And their bottom line risk categories are can be simplified to financial and reputational, right? And you have compliance sitting in there that kind of if it's a Venn diagram, it's the overlap in the middle, but it's not to say that private sector organizations are simple, but somehow the direction and the vision and the framing for risk discussions is a lot more straightforward. And then you get to the public sector, where the organizations they move at the speed of approvals, right? The guardrails are entrenched into the system, and that's the role of government, is to protect, right? And so
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, so it's they have they serve a public sector governments serve a very different purpose in society than private sector do. So you would expect risk appetite to be different, leadership and operations will tend to be a bit more risk adverse, more cautious as a culture compared to the private sector, and it's baked into government processes and technology. And I'd also add that there's a third sector to consider too, which is the
Okay.
sector that I in my consulting practice, I work with quite a lot as well. And these organizations are very diverse, right? There's no one brush to paint them all with.
Yeah.
However, it's been my experience that those that are more dependent on government for funding tend to adopt sort of a similar stance to risk as their funders, right? So, and this is more at the leadership level. So when you ask about a disconnect between governance and risk across sectors, I find the nonprofit one to be particularly interesting, because when I'm looking at these three sectors, private, public, and nonprofit, there's the risk culture of each one, but then their governance and their operations risk cultures also vary. And so in the private sector, you'll see more risk-taking leadership, and their operations folks tend to be less risk-taking than their leadership. Tons of exceptions. This isn't a rule, but this has been my observation, right? And you think, okay, well, what's driving that, right? It's those who have created the organization are opportunistic, right? They are looking to move the organization forward quickly, right? With nonprofits, I find that in the leadership realm, they're wanting to protect the organization. They're looking at the sustainability and the long-term existence of their organization. And they're looking to protect. And operationally, these are very impact service delivery driven folks. They want change now. They're change makers, right? And so you have that gap in risk appetite that's almost the opposite of the private sector in the nonprofit. And then going back to the public sector, in your original question, they're more aligned in their leadership and their staff. That's been my observation so far. So I do find it interesting, sector by sector as a whole, how risk appetite and tolerance and guardrail really does take different forms when you look at different organizational cultures.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Now, Aaron, I wanted to talk to you about...
Oh, sorry, Justin, is that your door?
It's not my door. Is that? I thought that was coming on your side.
Oh, maybe that's mine. Did we not lock the dressing room?
Ooh, I think you better go look into that.
Oh, just 1 second.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. It's the 2026 RIMS president, Manny Padilla.
Whoa. That's a huge cameo for us here at RIMScast Canada. I think he might have something to say.
We should let him in.
Let's let him in.
Greetings, RIMS Canada members and the Canadian risk community. I am Manny Padilla, 2026 RIMS President. I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible at Risk World 2026 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on May 3rd through May 6th. Just wanted to provide a friendly reminder that advance rates are open through February 28th. This is the time to get your best deal on registration. Visit rims.org/riskworld to learn more. The link is also on your screen. Also, remember to save the date for the RIMS Canada Conference, which will be October 18th through the 21st in Quebec City. I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible there. Aaron, you're doing a fantastic job hosting RIMScast Canada. Back to you.
So if an organization could do just one thing in the next year to improve their risk maturity, what would you recommend? What's your sage advice? What would you tell our listeners out there to do to improve their risk maturity? And please don't say get more AI tools, because I've had
that would not be very people-centered of me if I suggested that. No. I mean, the ultimate goal for enterprise risk management is to improve decision-making so that organizational objectives are achievable in line with their purpose, vision, mission, and values, right?
Of course.
Organizations have ERM, don't have ERM, have ERM at different stages of maturity. So with that in mind, it's like anything in life, small achievable goals on a path towards your ultimate goal, right? So the ultimate goal being improved decision-making, thinking about what improvements along the way you can do to ERM in order to improve decision-making, not just at the top, but also in the functional operational departments as well. So that top-down, bottom-up thinking about ERM. So, first step really is understanding what you want your ERM program to be, right? In the whole maturity journey, optimum maturity isn't always the goal for every organization. So being clear on, where you want it to be and why, and working towards that. Recognizing that there tends to be an inflection point with ERM. So you get all your tools and your processes in place, and it's what we talked about earlier. Is then you get these kind of static reports and the whatnot response to ERM. So looking at how you can move forward on that, and it might be relooking at risk appetite or introducing it. It might be looking at this gap in tolerance that we just talked about, kind of sector by sector, right? It could be addressing that, and what processes or mechanisms that you have in place that might be impeding that sort of maturity.
All right, Nicole, last question. What advice do you have for rising risk professionals in Canada and even worldwide who are looking to integrate ERM more broadly into their daily responsibilities?
That's a super interesting question, because ERM was not on my radar when I was trying to path out my career. I started in policy and performance measures and evaluation, right? So that's been my background into ERM. When you talk about risk professionals, that's such a broad range of folks too. You're thinking about audit, you're thinking of insurance, you're thinking of business continuity. So there's so many different paths that take folks to ERM. But what I would say is, once you start practicing ERM, you really do see the value of it, and you really do embrace it. But it can be a lonely job. It's especially if it's your role to introduce it to an organization, and that's why today we have things like RIMS Canada, and we have communities of practice. virtually and in person. And I would really seek out those opportunities to interact with other risk professionals and ERM professionals to commiserate, to troubleshoot, to share tips and tricks, and really seek out that community, because within the organization, especially in the early days, it can feel like you are just checking boxes, and that's not rewarding. And really kind of just dig in that this does add value. There is a sense of purpose. It's very exciting when you see it working well. And find your people, keep talking about risk, and just and your passion for it will inspire others to want to see ERM succeed in your organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Trying to seek out those like-minded people. And again, we do commiserate a little bit. And whether that's at the conference or through those community of practices, or even at your local RIMS chapters, right? Having those conversations, having people to bounce ideas off of, encouraging those students to take leaps of faith in this type of industry from whatever direction it is always so, so valid. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. It was lovely to have you. I'm hoping to see you at the RIMS Canada conference in Quebec City in October, and we will catch up then.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Special thanks again to our guest, Nicole Stinson of Upside ERM Solutions. Be sure to reach out to her on LinkedIn to extend the dialogue about ERM. And of course, special thanks to our wonderful RIMScast Canada host, Aaron Lukoni. Look for a new episode every single month here on rims.org/Canada. My name is Justin Smolison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS and the host of RIMScast. Thank you for tuning in, and keep coming back to the RIMS Canada homepage every month for a brand new episode of RIMScast Canada.